Welcome to Land of Horror. Today, we will continue our journey to explore the most chilling mysteries. Do you have the courage to face spooky stories, terrifying legends, and unexplained supernatural phenomena? Join me as we delve into haunted places, dark secrets, and legendary figures that will send shivers down your spine. Before we begin, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any videos, and let's step into the world of Land of Horror together. Get ready, because thrilling moments await you. Are you ready to explore? Marrakesh in the late 1800s was a city steeped in tradition, its winding streets filled with the vibrant colors of textiles, the enticing aromas of spices, and the lively sounds of merchants bargaining. Beneath this facade of beauty lay a more sinister undercurrent. Rumors swirled through the crowded bazaars about missing women, their families distraught and searching. Yet, life continued. The markets were alive with chatter, and the sun cast a golden glow over the rooftops. Haj Muhammad Mesfui, a shoemaker by trade, had become a prominent figure in this bustling city. His shop, adorned with intricate designs and vibrant colors, was a haven for affluent women seeking the latest fashions. Mesfui was charming, his laughter infectious, and he had an uncanny ability to make anyone feel at ease. Little did they know that he harbored dark desires, driven by greed and an insatiable hunger for power. One evening, as the sun set behind the Atlas Mountains, casting long shadows over the city, Mesfui prepared for his next dinner party. He had carefully curated a guest list of the city's elite women, knowing that their affluence would be a ticket to his wealth. Mesfui meticulously arranged his home, transforming it into a lavish setting filled with fragrant flowers, glowing lanterns, and a table laden with exquisite dishes. Among the invited guests was Layla, a young woman with a kind heart and a curious mind. She was the daughter of a respected merchant, and had longed for an escape from her mundane life. When she received the invitation to Mesfui's dinner, she was overjoyed. This was her chance to experience the opulence of the city's upper crust and, perhaps, find a suitor among the eligible men who would surely be in attendance. As the evening arrived, Layla donned her finest dress, a deep blue gown that accentuated her bright eyes and flowing dark hair. Her father, proud yet worried, reminded her to be cautious. "Not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions, my daughter," he warned. But Layla brushed off his concerns, excitement bubbling within her, as she made her way through the bustling streets toward Mesfui's home. The moment she stepped into his residence, she was enveloped by the warmth of flickering candlelight and the intoxicating scents of spiced lamb and saffron rice. Mesfui greeted her with a charming smile, offering her a drink that sparkled in the light. "Welcome, my dear. You are in for a treat tonight," he said, his eyes glinting with a strange fervor. The guests mingled, their laughter echoing off the walls, but Layla felt an unsettling tingle at the back of her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mesfui moved among his guests with the grace of a predator, his laughter resonating but never quite reaching his eyes. As the evening wore on, the sense of unease grew, but Layla forced herself to relax, determined to enjoy the night. Mesfui made a grand show of serving dinner, presenting the dishes with flair. As he poured the wine, he whispered to Layla, "This is a special blend from my family's vineyard. It will make you feel as if you are floating on air." He raised his glass, and she followed suit, toasting to friendship and the beauty of life. As the hours passed, the laughter and chatter faded, replaced by drowsy murmurs. One by one, the women began to nod off, their eyelids growing heavy from the potent mix of wine and food. Mesfui watched with a cold smile, his heart racing with anticipation, as he prepared to fulfill his dark desires. Layla fought against the drowsiness, sensing something was wrong. She caught glimpses of her fellow guests succumbing to the drug that coursed through their veins. Mesfui's laughter echoed in the background, but it sounded hollow, almost maniacal. In a final act of defiance, she stood up, pushing her chair back with a loud scrape. "Excuse me, I need some air," she declared, attempting to shake off the fog clouding her mind. Mescue's smile faltered for just a moment, but he quickly masked it with concern. "Of course, my dear. Let me show you to the terrace." He led her outside, where the cool night air hit her like a splash of water, invigorating her senses. The stars twinkled above, and the distant sounds of the city were a comforting backdrop. But her moment of clarity was short-lived. Mescue lingered too close, his gaze too intense. "Isn't it beautiful?" he asked, stepping beside her, his breath warm against her ear. "The night holds many secrets, just like the city." Layla turned to him, the warmth of his charm now feeling suffocating. "I think I should go," she stammered, trying to find her way back to the safety of the gathering. But Mescue blocked her path, the smile slipping from his face. "You wouldn't want to leave so soon, would you? The night is still young, and I have many more surprises in store." Panic gripped Layla as she realized she was alone with him. The laughter from inside faded into an eerie silence, and she suddenly felt trapped. She tried to push past him, but he caught her wrist with surprising strength. "You can't leave yet," he hissed, his facade of charm dissolving into something more predatory. With a surge of adrenaline, Layla yanked her arm free and bolted toward the door. But Mescue was quicker, stepping in front of her with a menacing glare. "You'll regret this, my dear," he spat, revealing the dagger hidden behind his back. Layla's heart raced as she grabbed a nearby chair and swung it at him. It connected, knocking him off balance. She dashed back inside, her breath coming in gasps. The other women were slumped in their chairs, oblivious to the danger that loomed over them. Desperate to escape, she raced toward the front door, but Mescue was relentless. He caught up with her just as she reached the entrance, grabbing her arm and pulling her back with a violent force. "You think you can just run away? You belong to me now," he snarled, his eyes wild with rage. With a surge of desperation, Layla fought back, twisting and kicking until she broke free. She sprinted toward the staircase, determined to find a way out. As she reached the top, she saw a window ajar, the cool night breeze beckoning her. Without hesitation, she flung herself through it, landing on the ground below with a thud. Pain shot through her body, but she didn't stop. She dashed through the narrow alleyways, heart pounding in her chest, desperate to put distance between herself and the monster who hunted her. The sounds of the city enveloped her, muffled by her fear and adrenaline. Behind her, Mescue emerged from the shadows, a dark figure against the flickering lanterns. "You can't escape me," he shouted, his voice echoing through the narrow streets. Layla felt a surge of terror, but she pushed forward, weaving through the maze of alleyways. As she ran, she glimpsed familiar landmarks, the spice market, the fountain in the square, each step taking her closer to safety. She could hear him gaining on her, his footsteps heavy with anger. Just as she reached the bustling square, she collided with a group of men, their startled expressions turning to concern. "Help me!" she cried, breathless and wide-eyed. The men exchanged worried glances before turning to face Mescue, who was now approaching with a menacing glare. "What's going on here?" one of the men asked, stepping protectively in front of Layla. Mescue sneered. "She's my property. Return her to me, and no harm will come to you." Layla's heart raced as she realized the danger she was in. The men didn't back down. Instead, they squared their shoulders, ready to defend her. "We'll decide for ourselves what happens to her," one of them said, fists clenched at his sides. Mescue's expression shifted from confidence to rage, and in that moment, Layla knew she had allies. "Stay away from her," another man shouted, stepping forward. Mescue's dagger glinted in the moonlight as he raised it, but before he could strike, The men lunged at him, tackling him to the ground. A scuffle ensued, dust swirling in the air as they fought for control. Layla watched in a mix of horror and relief, realizing that she had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. The struggle intensified, and as Mescue grappled with the men, she seized the moment to slip away, heart racing as she fled into the heart of the square. Breathing heavily, she realized she needed to find her family, to warn them of the danger that lurked in their city. But as she ran, a chill swept over her, the weight of the night pressing down on her shoulders. She had escaped Mescue for now, but the terror of his intentions lingered in her mind. The sun rose over Marrakesh, casting a warm light over the city that had felt so dark just hours before. Layla made her way home, her heart still pounding with adrenaline. She found her father in the market, his face creased with worry as he spotted her. "Layla, where have you been?" he exclaimed, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I went to a dinner party, father. There was a man, a monster, who tried to hurt me," she gasped, the fear flooding back as she recounted the night's horrors. Her father's face paled as he listened, and his expression hardened. "Mescue," he said quietly, the name heavy on his lips. "He's known in the city, but I never imagined he would go this far." Determined to protect his daughter, he led her home, where he locked the doors and pulled the curtains tight. "We must alert the authorities," he said, urgency lacing his words. "If he is as dangerous as you say, we cannot let him roam free." As news of Layla's encounter spread through the city, fear gripped the hearts of its residents. The missing women were whispered about in hushed tones, their fates uncertain. Families gathered, sharing stories and warnings. But as the sun set once more, the threat of Mescue loomed larger than ever. Days passed, and Layla remained on edge, her sleep plagued by nightmares of the evening's events. She felt the weight of her family's worry, their protective instincts wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. Her father urged her to stay indoors, but she longed for the freedom of the city, the vibrant life that pulsed through its streets. On the fourth night after her escape, Layla found herself unable to rest. She crept to the window, staring out into the moonlit streets. The city felt alive, yet a sense of dread hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Then she heard it, a low, familiar voice echoing from the shadows. "Layla," Mescue called, his tone smooth and sinister. "I know you're there." Terror surged through her as she froze, unable to move. How had he found her? Panic surged in her chest, and she quickly stepped back, heart racing. But it was too late. Mescue had spotted her, his silhouette dark against the glow of the lanterns. "Come out, my dear," he coaxed, a twisted smile playing on his lips. "I just want to talk." Layla's father appeared behind her, eyes wide with alarm. "Get back," he shouted, stepping protectively in front of her. "Leave my daughter alone." But Mescue's laugh echoed through the stillness of the night, cold and devoid of humor. "You think you can keep her from me? I always get what I want." As the confrontation escalated, Layla felt a sense of determination rising within her. She couldn't let Mescue win. She had to fight back. "You're a monster," she shouted, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You can't take me again." Mescue's eyes flared with rage, and he lunged forward, but her father was quick, grabbing a nearby lamp and swinging it with all his strength. The lamp shattered against Mescue's shoulder, causing him to stumble back with a howl of pain. "Run, Layla!" her father shouted, pushing her toward the door. "Get help!" Layla hesitated for only a moment before sprinting into the night, fear fueling her flight. She dashed through the narrow streets, desperation driving her as she sought refuge in the heart of the bustling city. The sounds of her father's struggle echoed in her mind, but she knew she had to find help. As she raced through the marketplace, she spotted a group of men gathered near the fountain, discussing the recent disappearances. "Please," she cried, her voice breaking. "You have to help me. Mescue is trying to kill my father." The men turned, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern. Without hesitation, they followed Layla as she led them back to her home, fear and anger coursing through their veins. They arrived just in time to see Mescue retreating into the shadows, wounded but still dangerous. The men quickly assessed the situation, rallying together to confront Mescue. Armed with whatever they could find, sticks, stones, and their own determination, they formed a line, blocking any escape routes. "You've terrorized this city for too long, Mescue," one of the men declared, voice steady and resolute. Mescue, cornered and furious, snarled as he faced them. "You think you can stop me? I am untouchable." But the men stood firm, united in their resolve. "You will answer for your crimes," another shouted, stepping forward. The tension in the air crackled, and the crowd that had gathered around them held its breath, watching the confrontation unfold. In that moment, Layla felt a flicker of hope. She was no longer alone. The city had rallied against the darkness that threatened to consume it. As Mescue lunged forward, ready to fight, the men surged together, forcing him to the ground. With swift movements, they bound his hands, dragging him away from her home. The crowd erupted in cheers, a wave of relief washing over them, as they realized the nightmare was coming to an end. Layla watched, breathless, as the monster who had terrorized their city was finally apprehended. As dawn broke over Marrakesh, the sun cast a warm glow over the city, signaling a new beginning. The streets were alive with chatter, the people celebrating their victory over the darkness that had loomed over them for too long. Layla stood beside her father, her heart swelling with gratitude and relief. Though the scars of the past would remain, the community had come together to protect one another, ensuring that Mescue would never terrorize them again. The missing women were mourned, their stories shared in hushed tones. But Layla knew their memories would live on, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. In the days that followed, Layla found solace in her family and friends, their bond stronger than ever. The terror of that night faded, replaced by hope and determination. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, a survivor in a city that had learned to stand together against the shadows. As the sun set on Marrakesh, Layla looked out over the rooftops, the warm glow of the lanterns illuminating the streets below. She knew that while the past could not be changed, the future was bright, filled with endless possibilities. The shadows may linger, but she was ready to embrace the light, knowing that together they could overcome anything. Marrakesh was a city reborn, its streets filled with renewed energy after the capture of Hajj Mohammed Mescue. The air buzzed with excitement, a vibrant tapestry of voices weaving stories of bravery and resilience. Yet beneath the surface, a lingering tension remained, as families recounted the chilling tales of the missing women and the monster that had terrorized their city. Layla, still haunted by her experience, found solace in the company of her father. They spent long evenings discussing the importance of vigilance, ensuring that the horrors of the past would not repeat themselves. Her father had become a pillar of strength, a guiding light in the darkness that had threatened to engulf them. Yet, deep inside, Layla felt the weight of her own fears. Despite the celebrations, there were whispers in the market. Some claimed that Mescue had cursed the city before his arrest, while others said he had friends in high places who might seek revenge. Layla listened intently, her heart racing as she considered the implications. She could not shake the feeling that the danger was not yet over. With Mescue behind bars, the authorities initiated an investigation into his crimes, uncovering the full extent of his heinous acts. They scoured the city for more evidence, seeking to uncover the identities of the missing women. Layla felt compelled to assist, determined to honor the memory of those who had suffered. One afternoon, she met with a group of women who had come together to share their experiences and raise awareness. They gathered in a small room above the spice market, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon and cumin. Each woman took turns recounting their stories, revealing the heartbreak and fear that had seeped into their lives. Layla shared her own harrowing tale, her voice trembling as she spoke of the dinner party and her narrow escape. The women listened with rapt attention, their eyes filled with sympathy and understanding. Together, they formed a support network, vowing to protect one another and to ensure that the memories of the lost would not fade away. As the meeting concluded, a woman named Fatima approached Layla, her expression serious. "There are rumors that Mescui has allies in the city," she whispered, glancing around as if the walls might have ears. "We must be careful." Layla nodded, a chill running down her spine. She had felt it too, the unshakable sense that the shadows of Mescui's past were far from extinguished. Days turned into weeks, and while the city began to heal, Layla found herself increasingly consumed by worry. She had become hyper-aware of her surroundings, each shadow seeming to carry a threat. Her father, noticing her unease, encouraged her to step out and enjoy the vibrant life of Marrakesh. One evening, he convinced her to attend a local festival celebrating the harvest. The streets were alive with music and laughter, the air rich with the scent of roasted chestnuts and sweet pastries. As Layla wandered through the stalls, she tried to lose herself in the festivities, but the feeling of being watched nagged at her. As she explored, she overheard a group of men speaking in hushed tones. "Mescui was wrong. He should have been freed," one of them muttered, his voice laced with anger. "He was a genius, and they turned him into a monster." Layla's heart raced as she eavesdropped, her instincts screaming at her to leave. She slipped away from the crowd, her mind racing with thoughts of what this could mean. Had Mescui truly cultivated allies who believed in his innocence? The realization made her blood run cold. That night, Layla could hardly sleep, the echo of the men's voices haunting her thoughts. She decided to take a walk, hoping the fresh air would clear her mind. As she stepped into the cool night, the city was eerily quiet, the vibrant energy of the festival having faded away. As she walked through the empty streets, she felt an inexplicable pull toward the old part of Marrakesh, a district steeped in history and shadow. The narrow alleys were lined with ancient buildings, their crumbling facades whispering tales of the past. Layla wandered deeper into the labyrinth, drawn to a small, dimly lit courtyard. In the center of the courtyard stood a well, its stone walls weathered by time. As she approached, she noticed an inscription etched into the stone, the words barely legible. Curiosity piqued, she leaned closer, tracing the letters with her finger. "Beware the darkness that lurks within." Suddenly, a rustling sound behind her made her turn sharply. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man with dark hair and piercing eyes. He stepped forward, revealing himself to be a former acquaintance of Mescui. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "It's not safe." Layla's heart raced as she recognized him. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her. "I know what Mescui did to you," he replied, a flicker of sympathy crossing his face. "But you need to understand, not everyone sees him as a monster. Some believe he was only a product of his environment." Before Layla could respond, the man continued, "He had dreams, you know, but they were shattered by jealousy and betrayal. If you seek the truth, you must tread carefully. There are those who would do anything to see him freed." With that, he vanished into the shadows, leaving Layla shaken and confused. Had she just been warned or threatened? She hurried back home, her mind racing. She had to speak to her father about what she had learned, to warn him of the dangers that still lurked. The following morning, she shared her encounter with her father, who listened intently, his expression growing grave. "This is more serious than I thought," he said, his brow furrowed. We must stay vigilant. If Mescue has supporters, they could be plotting to spring him from prison. Determined to protect her family and her city, Layla joined forces with the women she had met before. They began organizing community meetings, spreading awareness about Mescue's supporters and the need for vigilance. The city had come together to confront one monster, and now they would have to unite against the potential resurgence of darkness. As Layla immersed herself in her new mission, she noticed subtle changes in the city. Shadows seemed to stretch longer, and the air felt charged with unspoken tension. Merchants whispered about strange happenings, reports of vandalism and intimidation spreading through the market. Fear began to creep back into the hearts of the people, threatening to undo the progress they had made. One evening, while attending a meeting with her newfound allies, a woman named Amina spoke up. We need to confront this head-on. If there are those who support Mescue, we must find them. We cannot live in fear. Layla agreed, her resolve strengthening. We should gather information, identify those who might be working in the shadows. She proposed, we can't let fear control us again. As the group discussed their strategy, a familiar figure lingered outside the window, a man Layla recognized from the festival. He had been one of the men who spoke in favor of Mescue. She exchanged glances with Amina, who nodded, understanding the urgency of the situation. The women decided to split into small groups, each tasked with gathering intel on the ground. Layla and Amina ventured into the darker parts of the city, where whispers of rebellion seemed to linger in the air. Their investigation took them to the underbelly of Marrakesh, a world hidden from the bustling markets and vibrant squares. The streets became narrower, the atmosphere more oppressive. As they moved deeper into the labyrinth, Layla felt a sense of foreboding creeping over her. In a dimly lit tavern, they overheard a group of men discussing the fate of Mescue. He was a visionary. They imprisoned him for their own gain. One man argued passionately, we must unite to free him. He deserves a second chance. Layla's heart raced as she exchanged a knowing glance with Amina. They had stumbled upon a network of supporters, all eager to rally behind Mescue. We must get this information back to the others. Layla whispered urgently. As they turned to leave, one of the men caught sight of them. Hey, what are you doing here? He shouted, rising to confront them. Panic surged through Layla as she and Amina bolted for the exit. They dashed through the narrow alleyways, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. Just as they reached a corner, Amina stumbled, and Layla quickly turned to help her. Get up, she urged, glancing back to see the men closing in. Amina grabbed Layla's arm, and together they pushed forward, adrenaline propelling them into the maze of shadows. Finally, they found refuge in an abandoned building, breathless and shaken. What do we do now? Amina gasped, her eyes wide with fear. We need to warn the others, Layla said, determination flickering within her. We can't let them gain more power. With their hearts still racing, they made their way back through the city, recounting their close call and the plans they had overheard. When they returned to their gathering, the atmosphere was charged with urgency. The women listened intently, their expressions grim. We need to rally the community, Layla said, standing tall. We can't allow fear to take hold again. If Mescue's supporters are willing to resort to violence, we must show them we won't back down. The women rallied around her, a newfound strength igniting within them. They decided to organize a larger meeting, inviting not just their allies, but also the entire community to stand against the threat looming over them. As the day of the community meeting approached, tension filled the air. Layla worked tirelessly, spreading the word and ensuring everyone understood the gravity of the situation. She felt a mix of excitement and fear, knowing that they were about to face the darkness head-on. On the night of the meeting, the square was filled with people. Families, friends, and strangers gathered. united in their determination to protect their home. Layla stood before them, her heart pounding in her chest. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice steady despite the unease swirling within her. "We have gathered tonight not just to remember the women who have suffered, but to stand against the forces that seek to bring terror back into our lives." As she spoke, the crowd listened intently, their expressions reflecting a mix of determination and concern. "We must be vigilant. Mescue may be locked away, but his influence lingers. We cannot let fear control us." The crowd erupted in applause, voices rising in support. Layla felt a surge of hope, the collective spirit of the community igniting a fire within her. In the days following the meeting, the energy of the community felt palpable, but there was still an undercurrent of fear. Late at night, Layla began receiving anonymous threats, messages warning her to stop her efforts or face the consequences. The words chilled her to the bone, but she refused to back down. One evening, she shared the threats with her father, who listened with a furrowed brow. "We must be cautious, Layla," he advised. "This is not a game. These people are serious." "I know, father, but I can't let them intimidate me," she replied, determination flashing in her eyes. "I have to stand up for those who can't." As the threats escalated, the community banded together, forming a watch group to patrol the streets at night. Layla felt empowered by their solidarity, knowing they would not allow fear to conquer their spirit. Just as hope began to grow, the situation took a dark turn. One evening, during a routine patrol, the watch group discovered a horrifying sight. Graffiti scrawled across the walls of the marketplace. Phrases like "free mescue" and "the true monster will pay" were splashed in bright red paint, sending shockwaves through the community. Panic set in as whispers of rebellion spread. Who could have done this? Layla wondered aloud, her mind racing. We thought we had the upper hand. That night, as she sat in her room, her mind replayed the events. The lingering sense of danger gnawed at her, reminding her that darkness still had a grip on Marrakesh. The following day, she decided to visit the local police station, hoping to share her concerns. As she entered, she noticed a familiar figure. One of Mescue's supporters was speaking to an officer. Layla's heart raced. Had they infiltrated the very institutions meant to protect them? As she approached, the man turned, a smirk playing on his lips. "Aw, Layla, we meet again. You really should know your place," he taunted, his voice dripping with disdain. Fury ignited within her, but she held her ground. "You will not intimidate me. We will fight back." With that, she turned to leave, her heart pounding with both fear and determination. The stakes had just been raised, and the battle for her city was far from over. As days turned into weeks, the tension in Marrakesh grew thicker. Layla and her allies faced increasingly bold threats. Their efforts met with resistance at every turn. The watch group had become a symbol of hope, but they were also a target for those who sought to return the city to darkness. One evening, while gathering information at the marketplace, Layla overheard a group of men whispering in a corner. "We need to show them who's in charge," one said, his tone low and threatening. "If we can scare them enough, they'll stop." Layla's heart raced as she realized the men were plotting something sinister. She slipped away, determined to inform her father and the others. "They're planning an attack," she warned as soon as she reached home. "We need to prepare." Her father's expression darkened with concern. "We must act quickly. If they're willing to resort to violence, we can't afford to be unprepared." Together, they devised a plan to fortify the community, gathering supplies and reinforcing the watch group's presence throughout the city. The stakes had never been higher, and Layla was determined to protect her home. The night of the planned attack arrived, and Layla felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She stood at the forefront of the watch group, her heart pounding as they patrolled the streets, eyes peeled for any signs of danger. As the moon hung high in the sky, a commotion erupted in the marketplace. Layla's heart sank as she saw a group of men emerging from the shadows, their faces twisted with rage. "We're here for you, Layla," one shouted, brandishing a weapon. Fear surged through her, but she stood firm. "You will not intimidate us," she shouted back, her voice steady despite the terror gnawing at her insides. The watch group quickly formed a protective line, ready to confront the threat. The air crackled with tension as the two sides faced off, a battle of wills igniting in the heart of Marrakesh. The standoff escalated, the men advancing toward the watch group. Layla felt adrenaline surge through her veins as she rallied her allies. "Stand strong," she shouted, raising her voice above the chaos. "We will not back down." As the first blows were exchanged, the crowd erupted into chaos. Layla fought alongside her allies, her heart racing as she faced the men who sought to terrorize their community once more. The streets echoed with shouts, the sounds of struggle filling the air. In the midst of the chaos, Layla caught a glimpse of one of the men reaching for a weapon, a knife glinting in the moonlight. Panic surged through her as she rushed forward, determined to protect her friends. Just as the man lunged at Amina, Layla threw herself in the way, the impact sending them both crashing to the ground. The struggle continued around them, but Layla's world narrowed to the man above her. She fought back with everything she had, pushing against him as she struggled for control of the knife. The adrenaline coursed through her, fueling her resolve. In a moment of desperation, she managed to twist the knife from his grip, sending it skittering across the cobblestones. The man's eyes widened in surprise, and with a surge of strength, Layla pushed him away, scrambling to her feet. Breathing heavily, she turned to rejoin her friends, but the chaos around her had intensified. The watch group was struggling against the tide of men, fear and desperation etched on their faces. The battle raged on, each moment feeling like an eternity. As Layla fought to regain her footing, she spotted her father in the distance, facing off against one of Mescui's supporters. A sudden wave of dread washed over her as she saw her father stumble, the man advancing on him with malicious intent. "No!" Layla screamed, pushing through the crowd. With every ounce of strength she had left, she fought her way toward her father, fear and adrenaline fueling her. Just as the man lunged, Layla reached her father's side, grabbing his arm and pulling him back. The fight seemed to stretch on for hours, but eventually, the watch group gained the upper hand, rallying together to drive Mescui's supporters away. Exhausted but resolute, they stood tall, a united front against the darkness that had threatened to consume their city. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the aftermath of the battle, the watch group gathered to assess the damage. Layla's heart ached as she looked around at her friends, their faces lined with exhaustion and fear. "We stood together," her father said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We fought for our home." But in the back of Layla's mind, a sense of unease lingered. The struggle was far from over. Mescui's supporters would not give up easily, and the shadows that loomed over Marrakesh would continue to threaten their peace. As the community began to rebuild, Layla felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would not let fear dictate their lives. She would stand up for her city, for the women who had suffered, and for those who still lived in the shadows. With her father and the watch group by her side, she vowed to continue fighting, to ensure that the light of Marrakesh would shine brightly against the darkness. Together, they would confront whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their determination to protect their home. And so, the battle against the shadows continued, each day a reminder that courage, resilience, and unity could conquer even the darkest of nights. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Marrakesh was a city in turmoil. The wounds from the fight still throbbed in Layla's heart, but the determination to rebuild burned brightly within her. The community came together, uniting in their resolve to stand against the remnants of fear that still lingered in the shadows. Yet, as they began to heal, cracks started to appear in the fragile alliance. Tension simmered just beneath the surface, with whispers of doubt and fear echoing in the alleyways. Layla sensed the change in the air. It was as if the spirit of the city was fraying, and not everyone was willing to hold on to the hope that had united them. One evening, while helping her father set up a community gathering in the marketplace, Layla overheard a conversation between two women. "Some say we should just leave the past behind. Why stir up trouble?" one whispered, her voice tinged with fear. Layla felt a pang of frustration. "Leaving it behind won't make it disappear," she thought, shaking her head. She knew that the threat of Mess Huey's followers still loomed large over their community. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers grew louder. As the community meetings continued, Layla found herself facing an increasing number of dissenters. Some argued for appeasement, claiming it was safer to retreat from confrontation. Others felt they were inviting danger by refusing to forget. "Do you not see what's at stake?" Layla argued passionately during one meeting. "If we don't stand firm, we'll lose everything we've fought for. Mess Huey's legacy of violence cannot be allowed to take root again." But her words fell on deaf ears. The unease in the room was palpable, and a few prominent members of the community suggested that they focus on rebuilding rather than stirring up past grievances. Frustrated, Layla left the meeting feeling more isolated than ever. That night, as she lay in bed, the shadows seemed to whisper secrets of doubt. "What if they're right?" a small voice in her head questioned. "What if fighting back only invites more danger?" As the dissent grew, Layla felt compelled to gather her closest allies, Amina, Yasmin, and Fatima. They met at the rooftop of her father's shop, overlooking the bustling streets below, and Layla shared her concerns. "The community is dividing," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. "If we don't unite, we're vulnerable to Mess Huey's supporters. They may not have been in the fight, but they're still out there plotting." Amina nodded, her eyes sharp with determination. "We need to reach out to those who still believe in our cause. We can't let fear silence us." Fatima, ever the pragmatist, frowned. "But we must be cautious. If we push too hard, we could provoke them." Layla sighed, knowing they were right. "I'm not asking for violence. I just want us to stand together. We must show our strength as a community." The very next day, Layla received an anonymous letter slid under her door. The message was clear and chilling. "Your defiance will cost you dearly. Stay quiet or face the consequences." She felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The letters echoed the threats she had received before, but this time they felt different, more urgent, more dangerous. Determined not to be intimidated, Layla shared the letter with her father, who frowned in concern. "We should go to the police," he urged. "This is serious." But Layla hesitated. She knew the police had their own connections with the very people they were fighting against. Instead, she decided to confide in her closest friends first. As the days passed, the tension in Marrakesh mounted. The community's fragile peace began to shatter when a shocking incident shook them to their core. One night, as the streets were bathed in moonlight, a fire broke out at the home of a prominent ally, a woman who had stood beside Layla in their fight. Layla rushed to the scene, her heart pounding. The flames illuminated the night, and a crowd gathered, their expressions a mix of horror and disbelief. The woman was found unconscious inside, her home reduced to ashes. "What are they trying to do?" Layla shouted, her voice hoarse with anger and fear. "This is an attack!" The police arrived, but their response was tepid, as if they were unwilling to confront the truth of what was happening. The woman was taken to the hospital, and Layla stood amidst the crowd, feeling the weight of their collective fear pressing down on her. In the days following the fire, the community was gripped by panic. Many families began to consider leaving Marrakesh. Fearing for their safety, the watch group dwindled, and Layla felt the strength of their cause slipping away. Desperate to regain control, Layla organized an emergency meeting. "We cannot let fear drive us away from our home," she urged, her voice rising above the murmurs of dissent. "If we leave, we give in to their threats." But the voices of dissent were louder. "We need to protect our families," someone shouted. "We can't risk more lives." Frustrated, Layla felt her heart shatter. "What about the lives already lost? What about the women who need us?" she pleaded, but her words were drowned in the rising tide of fear. Just when Layla felt all was lost, she received an unexpected visit from an old friend, Yusuf, a journalist who had been reporting on the chaos in Marrakesh. He had been following the stories surrounding Mesfui and his supporters, and he was eager to help. "We can shine a light on the darkness," Yusuf said, his eyes glinting with determination. "If we expose the truth, we can rally the community behind you. Fear can't survive in the light." Layla felt a flicker of hope reignite within her. With Yusuf's connections and her passion for justice, they began to devise a plan to share their story with the wider world. They organized a press conference at the marketplace, inviting local reporters and journalists to hear their story. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as the community gathered to witness Layla's stand against the darkness that threatened their lives. "Today, we share not just our fears but our resolve," Layla declared, her voice steady as she stood before the crowd. "We will not be silenced. We will not back down. We owe it to those who suffered, to those who lost their lives, to Mesfui's madness, to reclaim our city." The crowd erupted in applause, and Layla felt a surge of hope as the energy shifted in the air. The press conference marked a turning point, a moment where the community began to unite once more. As news of the press conference spread, more people began to come forward, sharing their own stories of fear and resilience. The outpouring of support strengthened Layla's resolve, and slowly, the watch group began to regain its numbers. With Yusuf's help, they published articles detailing the community's struggle, shining a light on the undercurrents of fear that had gripped Marrakesh. The stories resonated far beyond their city, drawing attention from neighboring towns and cities, where others had faced similar threats. However, as the light of truth spread, so did the danger. Layla began receiving more threats, anonymous calls warning her to stop her efforts or face dire consequences. But she refused to be intimidated. As the community rallied together, it seemed they had regained control. The watch group was reestablished, and the voices of dissent began to fade. Yet, Layla knew that beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. One evening, as she sat with her friends discussing their next steps, Yasmin spoke up. "What if they retaliate? They've already proven they're willing to resort to violence." Layla nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of reality. "We need to prepare for that possibility. If we stand together, they can't break us." But as they strategized, the phone rang, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. Layla's heart raced as she answered. The voice on the other end was low and menacing. "Stop your crusade, Layla. You're digging your own grave." The following days were fraught with tension. Layla felt the weight of impending danger pressing down on her. The community was on edge, and even her closest allies were beginning to show signs of fear. One night, as she patrolled the streets with Amina, they noticed a group of men loitering near the marketplace. Their laughter felt menacing, and an unsettling feeling crept over Layla. As they approached, one of the men turned, a familiar smirk on his face, the same man who had taunted Layla at the police station weeks earlier. "What's the matter, Layla? Still trying to play the hero?" he jeered, his tone dripping with malice. Layla's heart raced. "We will not back down," she declared, trying to project confidence. But the man laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the night. "We'll see about that. Tensions erupted when one of the watch group members was brutally attacked. News spread like wildfire, and fear gripped the community once more. The dissenters grew louder, urging families to abandon their fight. "Enough!" Layla shouted during an emergency meeting. "We cannot let this terror dictate our lives. We must fight back." But her plea fell on deaf ears. Many were paralyzed by fear, unwilling to risk their safety. Layla felt despair wash over her as the community began to fracture once more. With the community's morale waning, Layla and her friends resolved to take matters into their own hands. They devised a plan to confront the men who had attacked their member, determined to reclaim their safety. Under the cover of night, they gathered near the marketplace, preparing to confront the shadows that threatened their lives. "This is our home, and we won't let them take it from us," Layla declared, her heart pounding with adrenaline. As they approached the men, a tense silence fell over the group. "We're here to stand up for our community," Layla announced, her voice steady. "You can't intimidate us any longer." But the men merely laughed, and the atmosphere turned electric with danger. What began as a standoff quickly escalated into chaos. The men lunged at Layla and her friends, and a fierce fight broke out in the dimly lit streets. Layla's heart raced as she fought back, adrenaline coursing through her veins. With each blow exchanged, the resolve of the group began to weaken. Fear seeped back in, and Layla found herself outnumbered and cornered. Just when she thought all was lost, Amina fought her way to Layla's side. "We won't back down," Amina shouted, rallying the others. With renewed strength, they pushed back against their attackers, determination igniting within them. As dawn broke over the city, Layla and her friends emerged from the fray, bruised but victorious. The attackers fled into the shadows, and for the first time in weeks, Layla felt a flicker of hope. But the victory came at a cost. The community was still shaken, and the fear lingered like a heavy fog. Layla knew they would need to rally the support of their neighbors once again, to remind them of the strength that lay in unity. With the dawn of a new day, Layla organized a gathering at the marketplace. The community filled the square, their faces a mix of fear and determination. "We fought back together and we won," Layla declared, her voice rising above the crowd. "But this is only the beginning. We must stand united, or we'll let the shadows swallow us whole." The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time in weeks, hope flickered in the air. People began to share their stories, bonding over their shared experiences and fears. The watch group began to swell with numbers once more. Amidst the rebuilding, Layla received an unexpected visitor, one of the dissenting members who had once argued for retreat. The woman approached Layla, her eyes filled with regret. "I've seen the strength of our community," she admitted. "I was wrong to doubt. I want to help." Layla felt a surge of hope as she accepted the woman's offer. The fractures in their unity began to heal, and they worked together to create a more robust plan to confront the threats that lingered. As the community rallied, the shadows of danger returned. Layla began receiving anonymous messages once more, warnings to cease her efforts or face dire consequences. But she refused to back down. "We've come too far to turn back now," she told her friends. "We'll face whatever comes our way together." As they prepared for the next step in their fight, Layla felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. With Yusuf's help, they began to gather evidence of the threats against them, preparing to present their case to the authorities. But the clock was ticking. Layla knew that time was running out, and they needed to act before the shadows overtook them once more. In a climactic showdown, Layla and her friends confronted the remaining members of Mescui's followers in a final act of defiance. The streets of Marrakesh became a battleground, where the shadows of the past clashed with the light of their courage. As the dust settled and the sun rose over the city, Layla stood victorious, surrounded by her friends and allies. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, their bonds forged in the fires of adversity. And so, the light of Marrakesh began to shine brighter, a beacon of hope against the shadows, reminding them that together, they could conquer even the darkest nights. In the weeks following the showdown, Marrakesh basked in a fragile sense of safety. The community had rallied behind Layla, but shadows still loomed, and whispers of dissent continued to circulate in the alleys. Despite the newfound unity, a sense of unease simmered just below the surface, threatening to erupt at any moment. Layla worked tirelessly to keep the momentum going. She organized meetings to discuss their next steps and the importance of vigilance. "We cannot let our guard down," she reminded her allies. "The remnants of fear are still lurking, waiting for an opportunity to strike." But even as she spoke, doubt crept into her heart. What if they had only succeeded in pushing their adversaries back, only to let them regroup in the darkness? One evening, while visiting the local market, Layla overheard a heated conversation between two men. "Did you hear about the woman who went missing?" one said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "They say she was last seen near the old bazaar, asking too many questions." Layla's heart raced as she caught snippets of their conversation. A missing woman? The thought sent chills down her spine. She felt a familiar unease creep back into her heart, a reminder that danger still lurked in the shadows. After the men left, Layla approached a nearby shopkeeper, hoping to gather more information. "Did you hear about the woman?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The shopkeeper nodded, his face pale. "Yes, it's all anyone's talking about. They say she knew something about the past, about Mescui." Driven by a mix of concern and determination, Layla gathered her closest allies, Amina, Yasmin, and Fatima, to discuss the unsettling news. They met at her father's shop, huddled around a table filled with maps and notes. "We can't ignore this," Layla insisted, her brow furrowed with worry. "What if she stumbled upon something connected to Mescui's followers?" Amina leaned in, her voice firm. "We should investigate. If there's a chance to uncover more about these people, we must take it." Yasmin nodded. "But we need to be careful. We can't afford to put ourselves in danger again." Fatima, ever practical, added, "Let's start by gathering information from the community. Maybe someone saw or heard something." The next day, Layla and her friends began their search for answers. They visited the homes of neighbors, speaking to anyone who might have information about the missing woman. Rumors began to circulate about her involvement with a group that sought to revive Mescui's legacy. "We can't let them gain traction," Layla urged, her voice steady. "We need to expose the truth before it's too late." As they continued their investigation, they uncovered more alarming information. A network of individuals had been operating in the shadows, harboring beliefs that echoed Mescui's twisted ideology. Word spread that a clandestine group was gathering in secret, seeking to reclaim the power that Mescui once wielded. They met in abandoned buildings and remote locations, plotting to instill fear and chaos in Marrakesh once more. Layla's heart raced at the thought. "We must gather evidence of their activities and report them to the authorities," she suggested, her resolve hardening. "If we expose them, we can dismantle their plans." But as they strategized, an unsettling feeling settled over them. "What if they find out we're onto them?" Fatima asked, her voice laced with anxiety. Layla nodded. "We have to be careful. We'll move in the shadows ourselves." Determined to gather evidence, Layla and her friends decided to infiltrate one of the secret meetings. They disguised themselves, using their knowledge of the city's labyrinthine streets to navigate to the chosen location, an old, decrepit warehouse on the outskirts of Marrakesh. As they approached the building, Layla's heart pounded. The weight of what they were doing hung heavy in the air. "Remember, we gather evidence and leave," she whispered to her friends. "No heroics." Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. A small group of men and women gathered, their faces obscured by shadows. They spoke in hushed tones, their words chilling. "The time is right to reclaim our power," one man declared, his voice firm. "We cannot let them erase our legacy." Layla felt a knot form in her stomach. They were serious. This was more than just talk. It was a call to action. As the group continued their meeting, Layla and her friends moved quietly, documenting their conversations and taking notes. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse, and everyone froze. "Someone's here!" a voice shouted. Panic surged through Layla's veins. "We need to go!" she hissed, grabbing her friend's arms as they hurried toward the exit. But as they ran, they stumbled into a dark corridor, and a figure stepped out from the shadows, one of the men from the meeting. "You thought you could sneak around?" he sneered, blocking their path. Layla's heart raced as she and her friends darted past him, adrenaline fueling their escape. They raced through the winding corridors of the warehouse, desperate to evade their pursuers. "Over here!" Amina shouted, pointing toward a narrow exit. They burst through the door, emerging into the cool night air. But the danger was far from over. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them as they sprinted down the darkened streets of Marrakesh. The shadows were alive with their pursuers, and Layla's breath quickened with every step. Layla led her friends through the maze of alleyways, her heart pounding in her chest. "We have to split up," she urged. "They won't be able to follow us all." With heavy hearts, they each took different paths, promising to meet back at Layla's father's shop. As Layla raced through the twisting alleys, fear coursed through her veins. Would she make it back? After what felt like an eternity, Layla found a hidden nook behind a stack of crates. She pressed her back against the wall, straining to hear the footsteps of their pursuers. The echo of hurried voices grew fainter, and she let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Eventually, Layla made her way back to her father's shop, where she found her friends waiting, their faces pale with fear. "Did you make it?" Amina asked, her voice trembling. Layla nodded, though her heart still raced from the encounter. "We need to go to the police with what we've discovered. They have to take this seriously." Fatima frowned. "But what if the police are involved? What if they're part of this network?" Layla's stomach twisted at the thought. "We can't let fear stop us. We have evidence. We have to present it." The following day, Layla and her friends met with a journalist, Yusuf, who had been their allies since the beginning. They shared everything they had uncovered, the whispers of a growing movement, and the chilling discoveries from the warehouse. "This is bigger than we thought," Yusuf said, his voice grave. "If we don't act now, it could lead to more violence." Together, they crafted a plan to approach the authorities. But as they prepared to present their findings, Layla's gut churned with anxiety. Would they be taken seriously? Would they be putting themselves in even greater danger? The next morning, Layla and her friends gathered at the police station, their hearts heavy with trepidation. They waited nervously in the lobby, the air thick with tension. Finally, they were ushered into a small room to meet with a detective. As they presented their findings, Layla's heart raced. She detailed the threats, the missing woman, and the network they had uncovered. But the detective's expression remained skeptical. "You expect us to believe this without any solid evidence?" he asked, arms crossed. Yusuf stepped forward, pulling out a recording device. "We have recordings from their meetings. We can prove they're planning something." As the detective listened, his expression shifted from skepticism to concern. "This is serious," he admitted, "but we'll need more than just your word." Days turned into a blur as Layla and her friends worked tirelessly to gather more evidence. They interviewed neighbors, searched for the missing woman, and continued to document the movements of the Shadow Network. But as their investigation progressed, so did the threats. Anonymous messages filled Layla's phone, warning her to back down or face the consequences. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense, and fear seeped back into the community. Many began to withdraw, their voices silenced by the shadows once more. Just when it seemed the community's spirit was fading, news broke that the missing woman had been found, her body discovered in a remote area outside the city. The brutality of her death shocked everyone, reigniting fears that had long simmered beneath the surface. "We have to do something," Layla urged her friends. "We can't let this happen without a fight." But many in the community had grown weary, the relentless tension too much to bear. "What can we do against such darkness?" One neighbor lamented, their voice heavy with despair. Determined to reignite the community's spirit, Layla organized a memorial for the missing woman. She believed that by honoring her life, they could remind everyone of the importance of standing together against the darkness. The day of the memorial, the square filled with mourners, each person grappling with their grief and fear. Layla stood before the crowd, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We gather here not just to mourn, but to remind ourselves that we cannot let fear dictate our lives. We must fight for the safety of our community and for the memory of those we have lost," she declared, her heart pounding with conviction. Layla's words resonated within the crowd, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. People began to share their stories, uniting in their grief and anger. Together, they formed a renewed alliance, a commitment to stand up against the shadows that threatened their lives. They began to organize neighborhood patrols and support networks, determined to reclaim their safety. With the community united, Layla knew they needed to take action against the shadow network. Armed with evidence and a fierce determination, they set out to confront the remaining members. As they prepared for the operation, Layla felt a mixture of fear and resolve. "We can do this together," she reminded her friends, her heart swelling with pride for the strength they had found. That night, they infiltrated one of the secret gatherings, ready to gather more evidence and confront the danger that had haunted them for so long. Inside the dimly lit building, Layla and her friends moved quietly, careful not to alert their adversaries. They listened as the group discussed their plans, each word sending a shiver down Layla's spine. "This time, we will make them pay," one man growled, his voice dripping with malice. As Layla recorded their conversation, a sharp noise echoed from the entrance. The door swung open, and in stepped a group of men, familiar faces that sent a chill through Layla's core. Panic surged through the group as the men turned their attention toward Layla and her friends. "You shouldn't have come here," one of them sneered, his expression twisted with rage. "Leave us alone," Layla shouted, stepping forward defiantly. "We won't let you terrorize our community any longer." The atmosphere crackled with tension, and a standoff ensued. Layla's heart raced as she prepared for the worst, ready to protect her friends at any cost. In a chaotic rush, the confrontation escalated. Layla and her friends fought bravely against their attackers, the darkness closing in around them. Just as it seemed they might be overwhelmed, the sound of sirens pierced the night air. The authorities had arrived, responding to the evidence Layla had gathered. As the police burst through the doors, chaos erupted. The Shadow Network was dismantled, their plans thwarted at the hands of the community they had sought to control. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Marrakesh began to heal. The community came together to honor the lives lost and to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. Layla stood at the forefront of this transformation, her heart swelling with pride as they reclaimed their city. The echoes of the past lingered, but the resilience of the people shone brighter. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, a testament to the power of unity in the face of fear. As the sun rose over Marrakesh, it illuminated a city reborn, ready to embrace a future free from the shadows that once threatened to consume them.